All designers want to make the world a better place. It's in their DNA. But what happens when that ambition clashes with reality? How does that clash shape the jobs that we take, the people that we hire, and the careers that we build in 2025 and beyond? These are the questions at the heart of the Bespoke Careers Report and Handbook, The State of Sustainability in Architecture and Design in 2025. It's a one-of-a-kind report offering a snapshot of where architecture and design stands on sustainability today and where we need to go. We spoke to 350 professionals across the US, the UK, and Australia, from graduates to senior leaders, to understand how sustainability is impacting the hiring market. We also sat down with 6 pioneers who are leading that space: Andrew Waugh and Kossy Nnachetta in the UK, Tamar, Warburg and Heather Holddridge in America, and Caroline Pidcock and David Ritter in Australia. The second part of the report serves as a handbook for both sides of the hiring table. It's packed full of practical tips for anyone who wants to maximise their employability in architecture and design, and for practices looking to attract and retain the best talent. In this episode, I spoke to the report's editor, Hattie Hartman. Hattie is the sustainability editor of the Architects Journal and the host of the AJ Climate Champions podcast. Trained as an architect and urban planner, she spent over a decade practicing internationally before moving into journalism. She is the author of London 2012 Sustainable Design and the co-author of Energy, People, Buildings, and more recently the co-editor of Materials and Environmental Primer. An honorary professor of architecture at the University of Nottingham, Hattie is a leading voice on sustainable design. We discussed some of the key findings from the report, which you can download now at bespokecareers.com. Hattie, thank you so much for joining me. We're here to talk about the How Sustainability is Shaping Careers and Hiring in 2025 report. Why now? Why is this report useful, and why did you and Bespoke want to write it and talk about this for the industry now?
When Bespoke approached me about this, I really hadn't seen anyone else looking at this particular issue of sustainability in hiring and retention. And, you know, in the last 5 years, this whole landscape has changed. And the work of, particularly in the UK, the work of Letty, the work of the Architects Climate Action Network, the work of Architects Declare, the whole discourse has changed. That doesn't mean that delivering projects on the ground has changed. But there is a huge appetite of students coming out of school, of younger people in the profession, really wanting to change things. So when they can't find a practice that aligns with their mission, I mean, I was shocked by some of the statistics coming out of this. I felt they're very heartening, in fact, to see, 95% of architects, of respondents say that sustainability is a factor. That nobody's going to say it's really not a factor.
Sure.
But the fact that a quarter have left or declined a job based on sustainability factors is phenomenal.
So in the report, you note that most architects you meet want to leave a sustainable mark on the profession. Like you say, that's kind of, you would hope, a given in people's careers. But for me, for example, I'm an architect. I trained, 15 years ago, for example, and that was part of the agenda then. What do you think are the things that have changed over this period that, that mean that people in early careers are actually taking it seriously and have it as a sort of intrinsic part of their, not only learning, but also belief?
I think part of it is what's happening globally with wildfires, flooding, all these things are front and center in the headlines now. And I think that the architecture schools, some of them are really starting to address this. And some clients are starting, it's much more frequent, I think, for clients to come in the door wanting to do something about this, but they don't have any clue what it actually entails to deliver this type of work. So that's where the disconnect is.
And with that disconnect, as architects, so many of us have that feeling. And I suppose my biggest question out of the report is really about trying to understand how much of that is through education or lack of education, and how much of that is through coming up against an industry which is struggling to bring these things forward in a sort of concrete way.
I think that the construction industry is such a big thing to shift. It's like an ocean liner trying to shift things. And the only way to shift things is to have good examples that people can see and say, oh, they did that, I can do this. And it's also a very fragmented industry. And so, to get everyone on board from the client all the way down to the facilities manager, all the whole value chain, everyone needs to be pushing on this. And, I've been writing about this topic now for more than almost 25 years. And almost every exemplar project I see, there's like one champion. There's one person who's like on it from day one all the way to the end. And that's what we need across the board now.
So with that in mind, so much of it is about communication, presumably.
Yeah.
And having, in my experience, for example, having the data, having the actual evidence to back it up, to provide a compelling argument that isn't just, finger in the air, big picture speaking, because I think we can all kind of get on board with the holistic sort of side of things, but actually having the data, going back into the buildings afterwards to test the information, to understand the impact of what you're doing.
I think you're absolutely right. And I've been banging on about post-occupancy evaluation and needing evidence for how buildings actually perform for so long. But it is starting to happen. I recently hosted a webinar for the AJ on whole house retrofit. And we had a small practice, I think 10 or 12 people from the Cotswolds, one of the panelists, Charlie Luxton, and he was saying that, with the type of work they're doing in the Cotswolds, often it's individual homes. He's also done some larger projects. They actually are doing whole life carbon calculations. And so we said, who's doing it? Are you farming this out, or do you have someone in your office? And he has one person in his office who can do this and feed it directly in. It's no longer really good enough to just pass it off to an engineer. It's not that everyone in the office has to be able to do it, but you need to have it at your fingertips so that when you're designing, you can get those answers and also figure out how to present that to a client, in a compelling, simple way, which is not so easy. But I think more and more architects are getting to grips with this.
And I guess that is the role of the architect, isn't it? Being able to communicate those things, to lead a design team, to lead a client to our solutions, and having that as part of our tool set, I suppose, is kind of key.
And I think one of the things that comes out in this report is that ability to persuade a client. And, it's no good to have all these great ideas if you can't implement them, and you need to get your client on board. So more leadership training, more advocacy training. I think, it's not something you learn in school.
You also obviously talk about the sort of disillusionment and the disconnect between, the ambition and practice. And obviously that's felt quite widely in architecture generally. And it's not obviously just about sustainability. It's, low fees and overtime and things like this. And, obviously the sustainability angle, like finding a practice that aligns with your values, is really key and important for graduates now. And that's evidence in the report.
Absolutely. And, I think what I really think is great about this report, and this came an idea that came from Bespoke, is we've got a lot of how-to tips. So we've got what can you do as a practice to make those things that you are doing visible so that applicants can see that, and what can you do if you're an applicant to make yourself stand out? Because I think still today, and all these 6 kind of sustainability pioneers that I've interviewed said the same thing. You're not going to be hired just because of your sustainability skills. You still need to be a good designer. That is top, front and center. But if you can overlay those sustainability expertise or a deep knowledge of one particular aspect of sustainability with your overall design intent, that is a really useful skill. And that's what people are looking for, to be able to integrate it, and really to integrate it across the board. Shouldn't be an add-on.
One of the really compelling figures in the report is, I think it was that 11.2% of the people questioned found that their practices that they're entering into really aligned with what the practice is actually vocally saying about what they're doing sustainability-wise. And obviously, that creates a huge amount of sort of dissonance between, practices communicating one message and not, practicing what they preach in the work they're doing. And I suppose whilst I completely can understand how the industry is slow to relate, that must create such a sort of difficult position for those candidates coming into practice.
I think it's kind of normal, and it's not just in the built environment that, you can have these top line kind of objectives or even targets, but actually making sure that they find their way all the way down through even a small practice is not so easy. So that I don't think is so alarming. I think that's kind of to be expected. But I think what is possible is that everyone, no matter what level they are at, can be proactive and try to tackle things and change things. And you have to have your antenna up and see where the gaps are and see what can you do on each project. What can you do within your practice? How can you bring things to the table? So you just have to constantly have that mindset.
I suppose with that in mind, having that leadership have sustainability on their agenda, every conversation, it's not like it's the young person in the office always trying to put their hand up and saying, can we make it sustainable, please? Right. It's about that, the voice coming from leadership, I suppose.
Absolutely. So even if the leadership doesn't have the skills, they have to be willing to listen. They have
the message sort of thing.
But interestingly, and this is quite sobering, one of the stats that came out is only 1 in 5 sustainability leaders, so say a director in a practice, is saying that sustainability is core to what they do. I mean, of course, everyone's going to say sustainability is part of what they do, but you have some practices that are really pushing, like Archetype, for example, that's here in London and in Edinburgh. They were founded on this, and that's what they're pushing. There are a lot of other practices that are now playing catch up, but you need to have it core, even if it doesn't need to be the only thing, but it needs to be central. And that we still have a long way to go, I think.
And what place do you think that sustainability leadership within practices have? Because obviously there is now a move that lots of the major practices are now having a sustainability, lead, maybe a small team, maybe a part-time team sort of thing. And presumably the ambition is that being top of voice, being spoken about a lot, and that person having an active role has that sort of osmosis effect within the office to spread a wider message and generally upskill?
It does. It certainly can. And I've watched that happen in several practices, but you need to have support from the top. One example is Hawkins Brown. I think they started on this journey maybe 10 or 12 years ago. They now have a team of 5. Certainly HMM as well. A lot of the bigger practices have now teams, and they're resourced, and the sustainability lead has a seat at the senior table and can feed things in. That's what we need. But there's still a long way to go, because oftentimes it's a part-time role and a few days a month, and you can't look at all the projects as well as have a strategic view of how to drive things forward on a very part-time basis. If you're juggling actual project work at the same time, it's really difficult.
And you also mentioned that obviously when looking at candidates, having an area of speciality or a specific skill set, and whether that is passive house or carbon, whatever those skill sets are, again, is the ambition that person spreads the word, spreads the skill sets throughout, through time and being involved in multiple projects, rather than having a general upskilling. I suppose it's having key people that have a responsibility.
I think, key people who have a depth of knowledge on one subject, or keep, you can put someone in charge of, I don't know, even lunchtime CPD, making sure the lunchtime CPD is actually meaningful, and that the suppliers who are coming in, because the technical people in these product manufacturers are really knowledgeable, and they can easily talk about, one product out of 10 that is sustainable, but so you need to vet them, and you can learn a lot from that. Or organizing office site tours of a project at a key stage. Say if there's a lot of taping going on for airtightness. Get everybody out there to see what it looks like and how it's done at that key point. But these things often don't happen unless someone's kind of on it.
Someone's driving it.
Yeah.
One figure that I found incredibly interesting and slightly jarring was that I think 70% of people, people asked, said that they would accept a lower fee, a lower salary based on a practice aligning with their sustainability values. And whilst that is incredible to hear, from a sort of ethical standpoint, it is also a very difficult thing to hear for people, at a time when, cost of living is high and, we're all sort of struggling through it. And, there's all these sort of conversations ongoing. How much of that do you think are these two things opposing forces? Is it that you can't have a sustainable thing without a profit making idea? And does it always have to come down to the money aspect?
Well, first of all, that is the one figure that came out that I was like, really? And I did show it to my 28-year-old daughter last night. And she said, really? Architects are crazy. And, I do think that, we have a tendency to want to change the world and give things away without charging enough. And if sustainability is baked in from the beginning of a project, you can achieve a huge amount without a huge cost uplift. So that's what we all have to get to. When you come in after the sort of initial scheme is set and try to start doing things, it's too late. So I think, but in terms of the salary question, I would find it astonishing that, you...
We're all hopeless dreamers.
Yeah, yeah.
So I suppose with that in mind, do you think that having sustainability as part of the agenda, part of, even the job role, part of, the job description, that has an attractiveness for candidates, for example, to get the best talent to your team?
Absolutely. I was up in Edinburgh last summer to give a talk about my materials book, and I visited Archetype's office there, which they only founded 7 or 8 years ago, and it was buzzing. It was packed out. They've got so much work on, and it is a place people want to work because they think they believe in it, and they believe they can learn the skills that are crucial going forward.
With that in mind, how do practices move away from just providing that lip service? Because, obviously we speak about, Archetype. There are other, very pioneering practices, Field and Clegg, that have been formed with sustainability as a key. And there are obviously lots of other practices which probably feel like they're trying to catch up with the industry or catch up with their competitors. What are those moves that we need to be making that make sure that we're not just providing lip service to it? We are imbuing those values and we are actually, making change.
Well, I don't think you can change things overnight. You can start to say no to certain projects, which is very difficult. But you can also shout really loudly about the best ones and feature them on your website. Get around to industry events and talk about them. So really, really push the exemplars and make sure, they're all over your social media. So we need to see those best practice. And what's interesting is I think that the media landscape and the awards landscape is changing. When I first started writing about this, there used to be a RIBA Sustainability Award. Then it was discontinued because everything is meant to be sustainable, which is completely ridiculous because you need to shine a light on the best practice for others to be able to recognize it. And now, the RIBA has often, I think they try to have a sustainability expert on every jury, which is great. So that is huge progress. But that's what we need. We need to see the best examples.
And I think that is a wonderful thing. You mentioned Letty and, there are lots of organizations which are willing to give their research away. It's all open source. It's all for open to the conversation. I've attended lots of Letty lectures that have taught me a lot of things.
Yes.
And it's all there to be, enjoyed, learnt from and embraced, I suppose. So I think that is a kind of wonderful mindset to lots of people in this space that are, experts. Even, I know Field and Clegg have tools, their tool
it's
that you can use. It's a very generous space.
And it always has been, as long as I've been involved with this. It's a very generous space. But what's changed is 5 or 6 years ago, it's like, where do you go for information? And even when I went to the very first ACAN meeting on a dark November night at a pub in Dalston, it's like I ended up at a table, which was the comms table, and I asked the other people at the table, where do you go for information? And someone said, there's no good podcast, which is how I got started on the podcast journey. But the main thing is that it used to be, there wasn't that information available. Now you go to the Letty website, you download all these things. You go to Architects Declare, incraable resources on their resources tab. And not just in the UK. I mean, the AIA also in the States has loads of information, and they've been on this journey for a long time. And that came across speaking to the experts in Australia as well. Now the information is out there. There's really no excuse. Still have to digest it.
Of course.
Yeah.
And you mentioned those experts. In the report, you speak to 6 experts. What was your kind of criteria for talking to them? And are there any kind of key takeaways that you took from your conversations?
It was interesting how similar their outlooks were, and how it really is a global issue now. It really came back to the powers of persuasion, that we know what has to be done. It's kind of doing it, and I think that's where we are now. And part of it is having those who are leading the way talking to each other. And
sure, yeah.
And there are now more and more organizations that are making that happen. Built by Nature, based in Amsterdam, they're doing a lot of work on timber and building with bio-based materials. And they've set up a network of frontrunners so people can talk to each other. And what's great is, also across boundaries. They're now working in France, they're working in Germany, they're working in Spain. So the momentum is building. I really think it is building. But it's a big, big ocean liner to turn.
The report obviously in its latter half breaks down into kind of 2 handbooks, one for candidates and one for practices. With the candidates, it talks on about what practices are looking for, what sort of skills candidates should be focusing on and communicating to practices. What are some of those key skills that you found are most important and aid employability for candidates?
Well, I think anyone going into an interview who cares about sustainability needs to have a kind of a clear and concise statement that they can make that is not rehearsed, but that just sounds authentic. I think that's and one I think it's Kossy from Field and Clegg Bradley who says, a passion for sustainability comes from a deeper place. It comes from a deeper place, and that can come across in an interview. It's not that you have to have huge experience, but you can demonstrate a project you've done in school, what the premise was, how you carried it through, or if you have actual experience on a project delivering something, you can explain that in the context of all your other skills, design skills. It has to be a personality fit with a practice as well. So sustainability is only one bit of it, but if you're able to present that in a persuasive way, it can give you a step up. And I think everyone across the board has said the younger people coming into the practices are the ones who are really leading the way on this. And what's interesting is that it's often a leadership opportunity to actually take on more responsibility at an earlier stage in your career if you have these skills and you're proactive about it.
I think, it's a wonderful response. And, in my personal experience working with, young people in practice and having people come in with that passion, with that energy that is able to shake things up because, they're coming at this thing fresh and maybe they have a bit of naivety, but that's brilliant because that does challenge the status quo and it does make things at least have a bit of, effort and change to it.
Totally.
And is that a similar message that came from all of those 6 experts? With people they're looking for, the candidates that they're searching for, are those the values that they're looking for? Is it just about value?
It's about the ability to see the big picture and dive into the detail. And I think Heather Holddridge from Lake Flato in Texas said it well. She said, with sustainability, you're always going to be learning new things. And so we're looking for people who are curious, who are going to, be able to take on a challenge and do the research to figure out, what's the best solution to a particular problem. And that ability to kind of overlay a sustainability ethos to everything you're tackling. It sounds simplistic. It's not easy to do. I mean, one thing that's really great about this report is for applicants, job applicants, there's actually for both sides of the hiring table, but for applicants in particular, there's a little to-do checklist of how you can, really quickly start to upskill yourself in this area. I mean, simple things like get yourself on LinkedIn and start following 8 or 10 people who you can spot who are really leaders in this area. And you can quickly, one thing lead you to the next thing will lead you to another report. That's one thing. I mean, there's a whole list of very simple things that you can do to sort of jumpstart this process.
And obviously we've spoken about the candidates. How should the practices, and I think this is sort of mentioned in the report as well, how should the practices be looking to retain the best talent, to attract and retain those best and sustainability minded people?
So I think what we kind of honed in on 3 real aspects of this. One is you got to have the good projects, and those projects need to have evidence behind them. So measuring the impacts of your best projects. And then where is the expertise in the practice? Foreground those people who have got those skills. Have them out in industry events. Have them on your website in kind of news bullet points or, other thought leadership pieces. Put them out there. So candidates are going to look at your website. They're going to look at LinkedIn. They're going to look at your social media. Those places need to be foregrounding the not just the projects, but also the people behind them. And there is one more point. As a candidate, you really want to know, are you going to be able to learn? And some practices offer actually training. And interestingly, again, Lake Flato in Texas, they require everyone who comes on board to get a certification within 6 months of joining. Could be LEED, it could be the Living Building Challenge. And, many practices in the UK offer passive house training now. So that's attractive if someone's really wanting to skill up, to think that they're going to be supported to do those things.
It does have that feeling of, I guess, that we are taking it seriously. It's not just something that's spoken about, it's something that's actually implemented, I suppose.
And you can ask those questions in the job interview rather than sort of leaving them unspoken. Like specific questions about sustainability, they often don't feature or in job descriptions.
How important do you think having a named and, almost displayed sustainability lead or sustainability team is within these practices? Having someone that's accountable, visible for either candidates to see that you're taking it seriously, and for your clients and for other people within the industry to understand that this is something that you are, it's part and parcel of the practice.
I think applicants are really looking for that. They're looking to see, is there a sustainability lead or a sustainability team? Who are they? I think it was half of applicants said that was something that they look for, which is fantastic. I mean, 5 years ago, that certainly wasn't the case. And now in the UK, the sustainability leads have a whole network where they talk to each other. They had their first away retreat last summer. I think another one's being planned for this autumn. So it's all building.
It's growing.
It's growing.
So there's this quite poignant quote at the end of the report by David Ritter that makes the comparison: if architects continue being architects, they'll go like the dinosaurs. And I wondered what you thought about that quote and what you kind of think generally about the future and the idea of our adaptations or, dying out sort of thing.
David Ritter is speaking on behalf of Grimshaw from Melbourne, and I it's fantastic to hear him say that, and that coming from a large established practice, that view, because it is so true, and we just can't carry on the way we've been carrying on, and retrofit is where it's at. Retrofit is in the schools. Retrofit, we need to get to grips with what to do with our existing buildings. And, I think part of this whole challenge is being able to question the brief. If a client comes to you and wants to build a big, bold, shiny new building, maybe you can say, let's have a look in a 25-mile radius and see if there isn't an existing building that could fulfill this brief that we can modify. I mean, that is turning architecture on its head. And that's what we need to do. I think David is right. I think the future of the profession is incredibly exciting. I think architects have the strategic mindset and the technical skills to address these challenges. If I were starting all over again, I might be a landscape architect, because I think you need to understand the ecology of a site before you draw a line or make a line on a screen. But I think, and collaborating across disciplines is also where it's at. I think, it's happening more and more and more. But I think it's tremendously exciting.
Do you think the sort of collaboration piece, because I've always found that structural engineers are very good at communicating, or at least in my experience of working with structural engineers, they've always been very good at communicating that big picture idea of, we could go down this route, and this route of the structure of the building, and they have a intrinsic understanding of how much intensive carbon that would be to go down a different route. And that feels like it comes from a place of mindset. So there's this idea of, we could do X, Y, Z, or we could retain the existing thing. But it also comes from a mindset of having the data to have that understanding and have the tangible,
absolutely,
but feel for
absolutely.
it that is convincing. Because obviously, in my experience, having worked for a lot of developer clients, we completely went from a mindset of, obviously, we're going to knock this building down and we're going to put something much bigger in, to very recently, in the last couple of years, being of the complete opposite mindset and saying, of course, we're going to retain this building, and how are we going to do that? And that, for me, came from a mindset shift, obviously a political one as well, because of all the stuff that was going on with the Marks and Spencers in London, for example. But it was that sort of big shift in just belief, if you will. I just wondered if you had
when I first started on this journey, I spent a lot of time talking to services engineers, mechanical engineers, because it was all about operational carbon. And that shifted about 10 years ago. And now the structural engineers are really where it's at. I think, I think the engineers are more comfortable sometimes with these numbers, but as architects, we really need to get to grips with that and be able to be on top of that agenda and be on top of those facts. And be very good at presenting them graphically in a way that clients can relate to. And I think all those skills are skills that architects have.
Completely. Do you think those conversations are had early enough? Are we in the room?
The problem is that often there's not enough resource for a client to hire the engineers right at the beginning. And, so many practices have engineers in-house now, the big ones. But what can you do? You have to get in there as early as possible.
Yeah, completely. I think the report's interesting because people obviously
I think this
have
report,
the ethos.
This report, just to say, I thought it was an interesting idea, but it's gone way beyond what I thought it would achieve, because it really sets out an appetite from the profession for change, and it also sets out in such simple terms, here are some simple things you can do to start this journey. And it's an easy read. It's presented in a very imaginative graphic novel style. And sustainability is often a dry and boring topic. But in this case, it's a good read. It's a great read, actually. So I hope people will download it and have a look, flip through. It's just 40 pages.
And what do you think is the sort of big takeaway, the big the big benefit of the report, I suppose?
The big takeaway is that sustainability is where it's at. And as David Ritter of Grimshaw said, if you don't get with the program, you're going to be out like the dinosaurs. But I think what makes it a compelling read is that it's not preaching. It's actually giving you easy, navigable steps of how to get on this journey and move forward and put yourself forward. You know, how people who want to hire can find the best talent, and how people who are looking for jobs can put themselves forward in the best possible way.
I found it intriguing that the report is actually structured in a narrative manner. Was that intentional?
Well, that's why it's such an easy read, because we've structured it in 4 acts. And it's kind of like all the high hopes that Act 1, all the high hopes that you come into the profession with. Act 2, the disillusionment. Act 3, what can we do? And Act 4, the future, where do we go from here? It kind of flows, and it's not all bunch of pie charts and data. The other thing I would say is that this is a big picture look at where sustainable design sits globally in these 3 different markets where Bespoke works, here in the UK, in the US, and in Australia. But it's also structured and intended to be of use for an individual. So as an applicant or as a person hiring, there are lots of easy to grasp tips about how to take this forward.
And interestingly, the narrative probably follows the feelings that someone has in their career. So they start in that, initial university days of high hope and being able to change the world, the struggles they go through in practice. And then here we are now trying to sort of, look for a way forward, I guess.
It's a hopeful picture.
Hattie, that was absolutely fascinating, and I'm excited for the report to go out and be shared. Thank you so much for joining me.
I hope it will get really good traction. It certainly deserves so. And I think it's a really impressive take on how to unravel the complexity of sustainability in a way that people can easily understand.
So where do we go to find it?
You can download the report from bespokecareers.com, and I'll certainly be posting it on my LinkedIn. It should be easy to find.
Thank you. Welcome to the next section of this CPD, where we'll be looking into a few different areas of sustainability, careers, and the profession. There'll be some great actionable advice for you to take away, so make sure you stick around. First of all, we'll be looking at how employers, those architecture and design practices, can attract and keep the best sustainability-minded talent. Whether this is specific roles like sustainability leads or your other staff members who have a passion and skill set for sustainability. We will talk about your visibility and your messaging and give you a checklist of how you can move forward if you really are serious about sustainability. Secondly, we'll look at how candidates can maximize their employability in relation to sustainability. This is a practical guide for early to mid-career professionals, so hopefully really relevant to a lot of you in the audience. We'll be focusing on the skills that you need to be building and also how best to present and market yourself to those potential employers. We'll also be hearing from our 6 sustainability pioneers, so let's learn a little bit more about them. Kossy Nnachetta is a partner at Field & Clegg Bradley Studios, where she recently led the development of the mass timber Thornton building for bioinformatics on the Wellcome Genome campus south of Cambridge. She's currently leading the redevelopment of the International Slavery and Maritime Museum in Liverpool. She mentors widely both inside and outside the practice and is committed to bringing fresh voices to the design table. David Ritter joined Grimshaw as sustainability lead for Australia and New Zealand in early 2024, after almost 9 years at Atelier 10. He's trained as both an architect and as a building services engineer. He's passionate about environmental design education and has taught extensively over the years. Andrew Waugh is the founder and the director of 30 Strong Waugh Thistleton Architects, a practice that he co-founded in 1997 with Anthony Thistleton. Waugh has pioneered the use of engineered timber in the UK and beyond, long before awareness of the climate emergency shifted industry focus towards timber. He lectures extensively across Europe and in North America on the greater adoption of timber in buildings. Tamar Warburg is a Director of Sustainability and Associate Principal at Sasaki, a 300-strong architecture, landscape, planning and urban design practice in Boston. She joined Sasaki in 2019 after a 25-year career in sustainable design in Boston, Israel and Washington DC. In addition to project work, she directs Sasaki's Sustainable Leaders Program, training staff responsible for sustainability targets and metrics on projects. Caroline Pidcock has run her own practice, Pidcock, for more than 30 years and has built her career as a leading champion of green design in Australia through widespread industry engagement. She's currently the co-chair of the Australian Institute of Architects National Climate Action. She chairs industry events and juries, teaches and lectures widely. Since 2018, she's focused primarily on regenerative design. Heather Holddridge is a partner and director of design performance at San Antonio, Texas-based Lake Flato Architects, where she's worked for more than 15 years. She founded and developed Lake Flato's sustainability team, which now numbers 5 architects. There's so much that we can learn from these experts, and it's not just their knowledge, it's also how they present themselves, where they show up, and how they communicate their values. Now, you can follow along with this aspect of the CPD using the bespoke State of Sustainability report if you've downloaded the PDF from the website. Okay, let's get started with the employers. How to attract and keep sustainability-minded talent, a practical guide for architecture and design practices. I think we all know that architects and designers can spot greenwashing from a mile off. Vague mission statements and surface-level commitments just won't attract the best candidates. Today's professionals demand the evidence, and as studios, we need to be practicing what we preach. As our first point of call, we wanted to find out what our candidates are looking for in relation to sustainability when considering job opportunities. And through our survey, we found that 95% of candidates consider sustainability ethos when looking for a job. Okay, that's a no-brainer, but we also found that more than half of candidates are looking for evidence-based design techniques, things like life cycle analysis as a clear signal of a practice's sustainability commitment. Similar responses highlighted that the real examples of exemplary projects were absolutely key, along with clear visibility of a practice's sustainability team. These are the big factors that candidates are looking for when applying for roles. The really surprising figure was that 47% of candidates even stated that they would move firms if they were offered better sustainability training. Now, that's food for thought. These findings align perfectly with our 3 sustainability pillars of attracting and keeping sustainability-minded talent. These are real projects, visible expertise, and training and development. These are your North Star in terms of communicating your ethos, and embedding these 3 pillars are an ongoing task. Your website is key to this, as are your job adverts and your social media presence. These are the places that candidates will be looking first. So consider something like a regular social media series spotlighting one of your employees, their take on sustainable design, and why they chose your firm. Make sustainability part of your regular communications, not just a separate section that feels bolted on. Okay, so what I want to do is to jump into each of these pillars in detail. So let's start with pillar 1, real projects, showcasing the actual work with measurable impact. Our surveys revealed that candidates want evidence, not just claims, with over half of the candidates noting exemplary projects as a top consideration when choosing a practice. And your project portfolio is the first place that they look when evaluating your ethos. Maybe you're all a bit burnt out by your ambitious rhetoric on your about page. Your projects are your evidence, your credibility against greenwashing and archy-speak, but they need to be easy to find, clearly presented, and backed up with measurable metrics. Okay, it's not just about the numbers though. We want to understand the journey, how these decisions were made, the trade-offs, and how sustainability shaped those outcomes. So in essence, you want to be telling the full story, explaining the why behind your work, include data where you can, and celebrate the challenges as well as the successes. Okay, now on to pillar 2, visible expertise, showing the people behind the work. In our survey, we found that just over a third of practices have a full-time sustainability lead. So leaning into this could be an absolutely huge differentiator for you and your firm. Not only upskilling, serving your clients, but also attracting the best talent. We found that over half of candidates rank a practice's sustainability team as a top consideration when applying for a role. So much of this is about leadership, knowing that this is a key driver to a practice and who are the people that are responsible for it. The point is that if the people are doing the work, you need to make them more visible. And if you don't currently have a team or even a lead, now's the time to act. At the very least, it could be appointing someone internally or just resourcing them to focus on this subject. Ultimately, it's about letting your team be seen, making them clearly visible on your website, showing their impact across different projects, encouraging them to speak publicly about your approach, and supporting them with the time, the budget, and the agency to become a voice within the practice and within the wider industry. From a candidate's point of view, they want to know about the leadership within the firm, who they'll be working with and learning from, and this is communicated through project stories, thought leadership pieces, events, and interviews. Lastly, there's Pillar 3, training and development, investing in your people. Around half of the candidates interviewed said that they would move firms for better sustainability training. It's a real draw for professionals and can range from general sustainability upskilling to very specific things like becoming a passive house designer. Our sustainability pioneers all agreed that the most important sustainability skills are sustainability brief setting, retrofit and reuse expertise, and client advocacy and championing. And so much of this is about the alignment of leadership and sustainability, whether that's leading clients along a journey or leading staff in a practice's ethos. Backing employees to pursue certification like LEED, BREEAM or Passive House, pairing juniors with more experienced mentors on live projects, involving sustainability champions in bids, pictures and client education, supporting speaking engagements, secondments and event participation, and making project-based learning part of every career path. Okay, so we've reviewed all three sustainability pillars of attracting and keeping sustainability-minded talent. Now let's look at some practical actions any of our architecture and design practices can start implementing today to show our intentions around sustainability. And remember, you don't need to overhaul everything at once, but you do need to start. Our aim here is to inspire action, to provide clear signals to candidates, clients, and your own team that sustainability is a key part of how you work. Appoint a sustainability lead or team. You could start with the people that are already in your organization. Start an informal lunchtime group, or if you really want to take charge, then hire an expert with sustainability and an architectural background. Allocate the budget and time for team members to get certified with things such as LEED or BREEAM. There's an array of training courses available for this, and you could assign roles strategically amongst your project teams or at management level. Showcase your sustainability team and lead on your website. This creates great visibility and shows the people behind the data. This is as important for clients as much as it is for candidates. Add measurable sustainability data to key projects on your website. Choosing a data set, making it comparable and clear is really important to this. Update all job ads to include specific sustainability commitments and projects. It sends a clear message to your candidates, what you stand for, what you want for your employees, and what they can expect from you. Include sustainability-focused questions in every interview. These are great discussion points and can really tell you so much about your potential candidates, their passions, and their level of experience. And post regular sustainability-related updates on social media, clearly communicating the stories that can inspire and advocate for your practice. Even better if you can start encouraging your staff to create thought leadership content too. Okay, so we've gone over what employers can be doing. Now let's look at the potential employees, those sustainability-minded candidates. This is how to maximize your employability in architecture and design, a practical guide for early to mid-career professionals. As mentioned previously, our sustainability pioneers have all agreed that sustainability brief setting, retrofit and reuse expertise, and client advocacy and championing are the top 3 skills expected to be in demand in the industry by 2030. So if this is what practices are looking for now and in the immediate future, we need to be considering how we get experience in those areas. position ourselves to stand out, and speak about our work through a sustainability lens. Okay, but how do we start? Well, starting with your why is absolutely key, showing your interest, your passions, and your willingness to learn. If you want to be hired to specifically drive sustainable outcomes, you need to be prepared to showcase that interest and commitment, particularly during your interview. Now, remember, this drive for sustainability shouldn't override everything else, especially your design skills, but you need to be ready to speak with conviction and back the aspects up with specific project or academic experience. If we want our practices to practice what they preach, we need to be doing the same as candidates. We also need to be showcasing how your sustainability ethos has shaped your design decisions within your portfolio. Ultimately, this will be your first interaction with a potential employer and hiring manager, so you want to make the right impression. If sustainability matters to you, you need to show it. Now, there are many ways to communicate this. They could be things such as site strategy and orientation, how the local and natural environment have impacted on your strategy and your building design. Material selection and sourcing, how you considered reuse, recycled, or natural materials in your project. Environmental performance metrics, the design decisions of the project backed up with the data. The social or community impact, understanding the local area, the population, and the wider consequences of your ideas. Or even showing your use of tools, things that are astutely relevant to practices today, such as life cycle assessments or daylight analysis. There are so many opportunities through your portfolio to really communicate your passion, your experience, and your skills that would help show you as the perfect candidate. Communicating the passion and the experience we have is one thing. How do we build the right skills, those that are in demand and really important to employers? Well, remember that sustainability is a broad topic, so we need to pick a lane and go deep. Whether it's climate resilience, biophilic design, or retrofit, firms want visible and specific expertise. Our sustainability pioneer Caroline Pidcock noted, as whole life carbon analysis will become legislated, there will be a surge of practices looking for that skill set. As young people, it's an opportunity to lean into a desirable niche fit for the future. And there are lots of other practical ways to skill up too. You could gain a qualification or certification in LEED, WELL, or Passive House, or you could learn a specific tool as suggested by Caroline. Remember to keep up to date with the latest industry events, workshops, and follow and engage with these sustainability leaders and their thought pieces. Okay, so we've spoken about finding a role, but what do you do once you're in the door to make yourself indispensable? Well, there are inward-facing activities and outward-facing activities. When looking at the practice, you can use your sustainability mindset to identify where the gaps are. You can introduce new ways of thinking and working, such as introducing a bio-based materials library, or raising the bar on lunch and learn sessions, even organising site visits to your own or exemplary sustainable projects. In your client work, you don't need to be an expert, but you do need to communicate why things are important, take people on a journey, and learn to lead. Be specific and avoid generic platitudes. At the end of the day, we all need to show what we've done, what we have learned, and what you might do differently next time. So if you are a candidate, we've given you a whole host of advice for finding opportunities, how to showcase your ethos and ideas through your communication and your portfolio, and also what to do to move the needle forward when you do get into practice. But what do our experts think? Those 6 sustainability pioneers that we featured earlier on? Well, we asked them a simple question. What does the perfect candidate actually look like from a sustainability point of view? Here's what they said. Tamar, Warburg, Director of Sustainability at Sasaki, said, "It's someone who has developed expertise to inject sustainability considerations into everything they've done, either in practice or at university, and seeks out those opportunities." Caroline Pidcock, Director at Pidcock Pty, said, "Someone who is open and interested in learning because it's not a tick box exercise. It requires understanding each project differently. In a team, you need a diverse group of people with different skills and approaches." Kossy Nnachetta, partner at Field & Clegg Bradley, said, "Passionate about sustainability, undertaken self-initiated research into the field, eager to share their knowledge with others and work as a team to push new initiatives." David Ritter, sustainability lead at Grimshaw, said, "Someone who is able to demonstrate how they met or exceeded a client's sustainability goals. You then get the sense that the person can tie the objectives to what you need to do to get there and how challenging it can be. If they don't have project experience, they could show innovative thinking in a university project, how they pushed an idea and tested it. It's also interesting to know if an applicant is engaged with the industry in any meaningful way. There are loads of sustainability organisations out there. Are they passionate? That shows that whatever they do, they'll be motivated to carry it through." Heather Holddridge, partner at Lake Flato, said, "Attitude is more important than background because sustainability is dynamic and multifaceted. We could not expect to find someone with experience in every area. Successful sustainability professionals take initiative and teach themselves new concepts. They build on their foundation in sustainability principles as new questions are asked and new challenges arise. They are resourceful and unafraid to dive into new territory." Andrew Waugh, founder of Waugh Thistleton, said, "We don't just hire one type of person. We focus our attention to what is required in the office. We try and put people in the right place on the pitch, and we talk to them about that position when we hire them. We always interview 2 or 3 times, but then people tend to stay here for 10 years. A great variety and depth of advice there from our panel of sustainability pioneers. I would really recommend learning more about each of them, their ethos, their work in practice, and also how they communicate their values online and offline. Now, with all of that advice, let's take a look at the candidate implementation checklist, those key takeaways and the real actions that you can start implementing today to take sustainability seriously. Update your portfolio to show sustainability decisions clearly. We want to understand the story, the drivers, and the results. Add a credential such as Lead AP, Well AP, or Passive House Designer. These courses are available online, in person, and could even be sponsored by your practice. Learn one tool, such as life cycle analysis, daylight analysis, or carbon modelling. Do your research first and then dive deep. Even better if you can use it on a real project. Write 100 to 200 words on why sustainability is important to you with examples, and then memorise it. It's a bit like your elevator pitch. Imagine being in an interview and having something like this prepared. Join one external sustainability organisation and attend at least one relevant industry event every other month. There are some really great events led by pioneering architects and designers. There is a sustainability-focused community already out there, waiting for you to get involved. Follow and engage with 10 sustainability experts on LinkedIn. First port of call would be to take a look at the pioneers in this report. Look at what they talk about, how they present the data, and the responses that they get from their audience. Choose one focus area and build specialist knowledge. Sustainability is broad, so whilst having a general skill level is great, a deep knowledge of one area can be very powerful. Keep a log of CPDs, events, and learning outcomes. These will not only help you fill in your ARB logs, but also serve as a reminder, the moves you are making to grow your knowledge and network. And if you can, find a mentor. Mentors can be so valuable, whether they're in practice or outside of it. People that have gone before you and are willing to share their knowledge. Again, a clear list of actionable steps that we can start making in our careers. You don't need to implement everything at once, but every little consistent move forward will help you in your career and your future role. So there we have it. That is the State of Sustainability in Architecture 2025. Hattie Hartman gave us a great overview of the report and handbook. And during our interview, we explored its aims, its experts, and its advice. If you want to learn more, I'd recommend checking out more of Hattie's written work and her podcast, The AJ Climate Champions. In the next part of the CPD, we then looked at 2 practical guides for the professionals. The first was how to attract and keep sustainability-minded talent, where we discussed those 3 pillars: real projects, visible expertise, and training and development, alongside an implementation checklist which you can start working on from today. The second guide, How to Maximize Your Employability in Architecture and Design, was a practical handbook for early to mid-career professionals to start taking sustainability seriously and how to communicate your why, your skills and your experience in the best way for recruitment and your career. We even heard from our great panel of sustainability pioneers on what they're looking for from their ideal candidates. I hope you found this CPD useful and it made you think about the importance of sustainability in your business and your careers. Many of us are doing great work, but half the battle is communicating it effectively with authority and consistency. If you haven't already downloaded the full State of Sustainability report, you can find it at the Bespoke Careers website. Or you can reach out to one of our wonderful team members at Bespoke with any of your questions, or just have a chat with them if you're hiring or looking for your next role. Thanks so much for joining us.